The story begins in the near future, though the exact year is never mentioned. From the advanced technology shown in the film, it's clear that humanity has made significant progress, but the world's condition is far from stable. Either there's a shortage of resources, or a major war between powerful nations is looming. The film doesn't give many details, but it makes one thing clear. Human nature is such that, when faced with danger, people reveal their true selves, often putting their own survival above the lives of others. The actual crisis hasn't started yet, but it's about to. Far away from the city, in the middle of the forest, Robert lived with his family. Isolated from civilization, they had built a beautiful home for themselves. Robert's wife was no longer alive, so he lived with his two daughters, the elder, Ava, and the younger, Nell. They lived happily together. Ava dreamed of becoming a dancer and practiced every day. Nell was focused on her studies, preparing for her exams. But the truth was, the world was dying, and it no longer needed dancers or educated professionals. A fight for survival was about to begin. Still, to distract themselves from reality, they kept themselves busy with these pursuits. One night, while they were at home, a massive power outage occurred, and it wasn't just here. The blackout had spread across all of North America. They still had a battery source, but their inverter had stopped working, so they had to spend the night in complete darkness. Nell needed to study, so she went to the car to bring a lamp. In her hurry, she forgot to close the car's trunk, which left the light on all night. By morning, the car battery was dead. The next day, when Robert decided they needed to go into town for supplies, he discovered that the battery was completely drained. They tried everything to start the car, but even after 10 days, they had no success. Finally, on the 10th day, Robert came up with an idea, using a chainsaw to get the engine going. It worked, and Eva and Nell were overjoyed. In truth, Nell had a boyfriend who lived in the town below, and she wanted to meet him. They used to visit the town every week. When they finally reached the town, they were shocked at how much had changed. Many houses were now empty, and there had been no electricity for the past 10 days. They went to a local market, but the shelves were almost empty. The shop owner came out holding a gun, afraid they might be looters. He asked Robert if they had money, and once he was sure they weren't there to steal, he allowed them to buy things. Still, the items they really needed, like an inverter, were unavailable because no new shipments had arrived. They took whatever food they could find. The shop owner's name was Stan, and he gave them some candles for free. Eva wanted to go to her dance class, and Nell wanted to meet her boyfriend, so in the evening, Robert dropped them off and headed back home. There was a gas shortage, so he stopped at a fuel pump, but a group of men on motorcycles forced him to leave. Nell's boyfriend, Eli, loved her deeply. That evening, Nell was with Eli, drinking together, while Robert and Eva started driving back home with Ellie. It was already dark, and on the way, they saw a car with 2 people in it. Robert wanted to help, but they pulled out a gun and told him to leave. Seeing the worsening situation outside, Robert decided they wouldn't leave their home until the power returned. Nell didn't like this. She didn't want to feel trapped. But Robert understood that it was now dangerous out there. 2 days later, while Robert was outside cutting wood, the chainsaw malfunctioned, badly injuring his leg. Hearing their father's screams, both girls ran toward him. They were terrified, but couldn't do anything to help. The blood loss was so severe that Robert died. Eva and Nell cried over their father's body all night, but in the middle of the night, animal noises outside startled them. The next morning, they buried Robert. The following days were extremely hard as they missed their father deeply, But life didn't stop. They had to survive. 2 months passed. Without their father, they had learned to manage on their own. Every day, Eva practiced dancing, but with no power, she had to do it without music. One day, she became frustrated. They still had some fuel left for emergencies to run the generator, and Eva wanted to use a little just to play music for a while. But Nell refused to waste it, leading to an argument between the sisters. Since they hadn't gone to town for supplies in 2 months, their food was running low. They had a few chickens for eggs, but one night, a wild boar broke in and ate them. Slowly, their problems were increasing. One night, Nell had a nightmare where she lost her sister. She woke up crying, and Eva comforted her. A few days later, in the evening, Eli showed up at their door. Nell was overjoyed to see him and asked how he had managed to get there. Eli explained that things in town had gotten bad. A filtration system failure had made many people sick, and some had died. He thought they might be gone too, since he hadn't seen them in 2 months. When he asked about Robert, Eva told him about the accident. Eli began living with them. Nell was happy, since they loved each other and grew even closer. But Eva didn't like Eli. One day, she asked Nell how long he planned to stay, saying he was eating their food. Nell asked why she hated him so much, and Eva admitted she was afraid Nell might make a wrong choice, that they couldn't care for a baby, and it was obvious she and Eli were getting close. Some days later, when Nell and Eli were in the forest, Eli told her he had heard that Boston still had power, network, fuel, and jobs. He wanted to go there and invited Nell to come with him, saying there was nothing left for them here. Hearing this made Nell happy, and she asked why he hadn't told her earlier. Eli said he wanted to know her better first. When the two told Eva about it, she wasn't pleased. She said it could just be a rumor and insisted they were safe here. But Eli wasn't going to stay, and Nell was already planning to go with him. Eva didn't stop her sister and gave her permission to leave, even though it was difficult for Nell. She had never been apart from her family before. Agreeing to Eli's plan, she set out with him on the journey to Boston. They had to travel on foot, a trip that would take several weeks, with no certainty about the route or what they might face along the way. One day into their journey, Nell changed her mind. That night, the two camped in the forest, and by morning, Nell told Eli she couldn't go on. She couldn't leave Eva alone. Eli wasn't happy, but he let her go. Nell returned home to her sister, while Eli walked out of her life forever. Eva was overjoyed to see her again. The sisters decided they would stay together and make the best of their lives here. Months later, as food supplies ran low, they began foraging in the forest and storing berries. Life seemed peaceful, and the two were happy again. Then one day, while Nell was out gathering food in the forest, Eva was chopping wood in the backyard. Stan, the man from the store, showed up. His appearance was strange. Even his shoes didn't match. He started asking Eva questions, and when she asked about the town, he lied, saying the story about Boston was false and many people had died. He also asked about her father, and Eva lied, claiming he was out in the forest. But then Stan's demeanor changed. He stepped closer and suddenly attacked her, assaulting her. Sometime later, Nell returned from the forest to find her sister lying on the ground in terrible condition. The monster Stan had also stolen their remaining fuel. Enraged, Nell screamed, but there was nothing she could do. She carried Eva inside, bathed her in the tub, and tried to give her aspirin, but Eva refused, saying they needed to save it. They now understood how dangerous the world had become. From that night on, Nell kept the gun close and stood guard, locking all the windows and doors securely. Days passed, and soon Eva realized she was pregnant. Instead of considering an abortion, the sisters decided to keep the baby. Nell vowed to protect her sister no matter what. Months went by. Nell often hunted in the forest, sometimes taking down wild boars, so food was no longer an issue. But Eva's mind was always on the baby. They didn't know what was happening in the outside world. Perhaps everything was gone. All they knew was that they had each other and were still safe. The house, however, was slowly falling apart. One day, during heavy rain, part of the roof collapsed. Eventually, the day came for Eva's delivery. She told Nell they needed to leave the house for safety, so Nell took her to a small shelter she had prepared. There, Eva gave birth to a baby boy. The sisters were overjoyed. Carrying the baby in her arms, Eva returned home with Nell. But she no longer wanted to stay there. The house was crumbling, its walls and roof falling apart, and it no longer felt safe. So Nell made a decision. She set the old house on fire, letting the flames consume every memory, both the happy moments and the painful ones. With nothing tying them to the past, the sisters left to live in the forest, starting over amidst the trees. And so, the story ends. This story teaches us that no matter what happens, life goes on, and humans never stop trying to survive.